gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight, we sail to ancient Greece. Feel sun-warmed marble beneath your sandals. Breathe in the sharp, herbal fragrance of thyme carried on the evening breeze. And let history rock you to sleep. Ariston shifted on the limestone bench, its stored warmth seeping through his thin himation as the Attic sun dipped behind the Acropolis. Below the Areopagus, Athens sprawled in honeyed twilight ochre rooftops fading to violet, the distant harbor a shimmering bronze mirror. He touched the simple olive wreath resting on his knee, its leaves cool and supple against his calloused fingertip. These sacred crowns, woven from wild olive branches, were the only prize awarded at Olympia. Honor mattered more than gold in the games. The scent of crushed thyme rose from the hillside where goats browsed, mingling with wood smoke from the city's evening hearths. His students had departed hours ago, their debates about Plato's cave echoing into silence, leaving only the drone of cicadas and the rustle of dry grass. He traced a vein in the marble beneath him, feeling the day's lingering heat. This wreath wasn't for athletic glory, but a gift from his former pupil Lycos, crowned at last week's Panathenaic procession. For your wisdom that steered my course, teacher. Lycos had said, Ariston's lips curved. Victory's symbol now cradled quiet contemplation. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the salt tang of the Saronic Gulf and the peppery bite of thyme. Olive wreaths adorned not just athletes, but brides, diplomats, and philosophers, embodying Athena's gifts of peace, wisdom, and resilience. He lifted the circle of leaves, its earthy green scent subtle yet persistent, an anchor to the living world as stars pricked the cobalt sky. Below, the Lyceum's colonnades lay empty. Aristotle's school would resume at dawn, but night belonged to owls and introspection. Ariston stood, the marble's warmth fading from his soles. He descended the rocky path towards the Kerameikos, the wreath a humble weight in his hand. Philosophers often taught in olive groves, finding inspiration beneath the sacred trees that symbolized Athenian identity. Tonight, however, he sought his small courtyard near the Agora. The city's evening murmur enveloped him. A potter's kiln sighing, a lighter's distant pluck, the murmur of neighbors drawing water. The wreath's leaves brushed his wrist, cool as moonlight. Ahead, oil lamps flickered behind lattice screens, casting dancing shadows on sun-bleached walls. The scent of thyme grew stronger near his gate, where the herb grew wild between cracks in the stones. Home, Ariston's courtyard, was a small sanctuary of stillness. High whitewashed walls trapped the day's lingering warmth, radiating it back as the Attic night deepened. He placed Lycos's olive wreath gently upon a simple stone altar in the corner, beside a small, weathered bust of Athena. The cool, earthy scent of the leaves merged with the sharper perfume of thyme crushed under his sandals and the faint, waxy smell of the single oil lamp he lit. Its flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that made the goddess's marble eyes seem alive. Philosophers like Ariston often maintained household altars, honoring both the gods and abstract concepts like wisdom, Sophia, or harmony, harmonia. He traced the smooth curve of the altar's edge, the marble cool now against his fingertips. Remembering his father's hands placing the first stone, he moved to a low table, its surface scarred by years of use. Unrolling a papyrus scroll, a copy of Heraclitus's fragments, borrowed from the Lyceum's library, the dry, slightly sweet smell of the reed paper filled the small space. The lamp's golden light pooled on the dark ink. Alba sepals. All things flow. Below, the city's murmur was a constant, low tide. Distant laughter from a symposium, the bark of a dog guarding a potter's yard, the rhythmic clop of a donkey's hooves on the packed earth street beyond his gate. Athenian houses, typically inward, facing with few external windows, created private worlds like this, shielded from the bustle of the agora, just streets away. He dipped a bronze stylus into a small inkwell, its vinegar tang sharp in the lamplight, ready to add marginal notes. The olive wreath seemed to watch him, a silent reminder of Lycos's striving energy, so different from this quiet study. A sudden, sharp cry pierced the night, the screech of an owl from the slopes of the Acropolis. Athene Noctua, Athena's own bird. Ariston paused, the stylus hovering. He looked up, past the courtyard walls, to the inky sky ablaze with stars. The cry echoed, a sound both wild and profoundly Athenian. Owls, depicted on Athenian silver tetradrachms, of the famous owls, were potent symbols of the city's patron goddess, representing wisdom, vigilance, and protection. He thought of the cosmos described by the astronomers at the Lyceum, spheres turning in perfect, silent harmony, governed by logos, reason. Yet the owl's cry was raw, untamed, a reminder of the wilderness pressing against the city's ordered stones. The scent of thyme intensified on a cool gust of wind, mingling with the lamp's smoky wick and the dry papyrus. He set the stylus down. The scroll could wait. Rising, he walked to the small cistern in the corner, its water cool and still. Cupping his hands, he drank deeply. The chill a shock against the warm night air. He splashed water on his face, washing away the dust of the Areopagus and the lingering intellectual fervor of debate. Drying his hands on the coarse wool of his himation, he gazed again at the olive wreath. Its simple, intertwined branches spoke of endurance, of roots clinging to rocky soil, of peace hard won. It spoke of Lycos's victory, yes, but also of the quiet, persistent work of tending an olive grove or a mind. The lamp flame guttered, making the shadows leap wildly for a moment before settling. The city's sounds seemed to soften, receding like a wave pulling back from a shore. Only the deep silence between the distant noises remained, vast and humming. He felt the cool marble of the altar beneath his palm once more, a constant anchor. The stars burned colder, brighter. The owl did not call again, but its presence lingered in the stillness, a feathered embodiment of the watchful night. The scent of thyme, sharp and clean, was the breath of the Attic earth itself. Ariston turned towards his sleeping pallet. In the small adjoining room, the lamplight casting his elongated shadow on the whitewashed wall. The scroll lay open, Heraclitus's words waiting. The olive wreath rested, a circle of life against the stone. The philosopher's thoughts, like the stars, turned in their silent, ceaseless paths, seeking order in the beautiful, fleeting chaos of existence. The cool night air carried the faintest hint of salt from Piraeus. The oil lamp's flame danced, a tiny, defiant sun in the Athenian darkness. The marble's chill seeped slowly into the soles of his sandals. The first threads of dawn bled into the cobalt sky, staining the eastern horizon with rose and saffron. Ariston stirred, not from sleep, but from the deep stillness that settles just before the world wakes. He hadn't moved to his pallet. The cool marble of the courtyard bench beneath his himation held the lingering chill of the night, a stark contrast to the warmth that would soon return. Lycos's olive wreath rested untouched on the altar, its leaves dark against the pale stone in the pre-dawn gloom. The sharp scent of thyme, undisturbed by the night breeze, hung crisp in the motionless air, mingling faintly with the acrid ghost of the extinguished lamp wick. He stretched stiffly, joints protesting the hours of stillness. The dream image of Lycos, straining towards the finish line beneath the searing Olympian sun, lingered vividly. The roar of the crowd, the scent of dust and sweat, the blinding flash of the victor's crown descending. Yet here, in his quiet Athenian courtyard, the reality was a circle of cool, resilient leaves, honoring not raw speed, but the patient shaping of a young man's mind. Victory wreaths weren't merely decorative. They carried deep religious and civic significance, binding the wearer to the gods and the community. Ariston touched the wreath again. It felt alive, resilient, a symbol of Athena's enduring gifts to her city wisdom. Rested from struggle, peace cultivated like the precious olive trees on the rocky slopes. He rose, the movement deliberate. The city below was still mostly silent, a tapestry of deep blues and grays. Only the earliest sounds whispered, the distant crow of a rooster near the Ilissos stream, the muffled clatter of a baker beginning his work far down a lane, the rhythmic splash of water as someone drew from a well. Ariston moved to the small cistern, its surface a dark mirror reflecting the paling sky. He plunged his hands into the cold water, gasping slightly at the shock, then scooped handfuls to splash his face. The chill was invigorating, washing away the remnants of the dream and the night's contemplation. The scent of wet stone and cool earth rose briefly, momentarily overpowering the thyme. Hunger stirred. He moved inside the small room adjoining the courtyard. From a simple wooden chest, he took a round loaf of coarse barley bread and a small clay jar. Unstopping it, the rich, briny tang of olives packed in thyme and oil filled the small space. He broke off a piece of bread, dipped it into the jar, letting the fragrant oil soak in. The taste was elemental, the earthiness of the grain, the sharp fruitiness of the olives, the pungent bite of the thyme, the smooth richness of the oil. Olive oil was fundamental to Athenian life, fuel for lamps, base for perfumes and medicines, essential food and a major export underpinning the city's economy. He ate slowly, standing in the doorway, watching the light strengthen. The olive wreath on the altar seemed to absorb the growing illumination, its green deepening. He heard the first distinct footsteps approaching his gate, light, eager, his students. He quickly wiped his hands on a cloth. The contemplative silence of the night was receding, soon to be replaced by the vibrant clash of young minds. He glanced once more at the wreath. Lycos's victory belonged to the physical realm, glorious but fleeting. The victories sought here, in this small courtyard shaded by thyme and philosophy, were of a different order, victories of understanding, of virtue, of logos shaping chaos into meaning. They were slower, less heralded, but rooted as deeply as the ancient olives of Attica. The sound of a polite knock echoed in the stillness. Ariston took a final breath of the thyme, scented dawn air, feeling the first true warmth of the sun touch the marble threshold. The wreath lay still, a promise of endurance. He turned towards the gate, the city's awakening murmur swelling like a wave behind the wall. The cool marble beneath his sandals was already yielding to the sun's returning embrace. The scent of baking bread drifted closer now, mingling with the persistent thyme. The voices of his students, bright with morning energy, waited just beyond the wooden door. The day's work of shaping minds, like shaping the tough olive wood, was about to begin. The debate flowed like the river. Heraclitus described swift, unpredictable, carving new channels through young minds. Demos, fiery as only 16 summers can make one, jabbed a finger towards the scroll. But if all things flow, Master Ariston, does virtue dissolve? Does justice change with the tide? Sunlight, now climbing the courtyard wall, warmed the marble bench where Ariston sat. The scent of crushed thyme rose as sandals shifted on the flagstones. He held up a hand, the gesture stilling the eager voices. "Consider the olive tree, Demos." Ariston began, his voice a low counterpoint to the distant bleat of a goat from the Acropolis slope. He gestured towards the wreath resting on the altar. Its leaves, catching the strengthening light, seemed almost luminous. Its roots gripped the attic rock, seemingly unchanging. Yet sap rises, leaves unfurl, fruit swells and falls. Winter strips it bare, spring clothes it anew. Is the tree the same? He paused, letting the image settle. Ancient Greek education aimed for arete, excellence of both mind and body, seeing physical training in the gymnasium and intellectual pursuit as complementary paths to virtue. The form endures, demos, while the substance within flows, adapts, responds to sun and season. So too with virtue. Its essence courage, wisdom, temperance remains, but its expression, that flows with circumstance as the Ilissos flows around stones. Cleon, quieter, traced the grain of the wooden stool beneath him, like the laws of Draco Master, harsh, unyielding. Then Solon's came, flowing like gentler waters, yet both sought justice. The sharp, clean scent of thyme seemed to sharpen with the intellectual tension. Precisely, Cleon. Ariston nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. He rose, feeling the sun, warmed marble through the thin leather of his sandal. He walked to the small cistern, its cool surface beating with condensation. Dipping a clay cup, he offered water first to Cleon, then Demos. The cold liquid was a tangible contrast to the warming air. The unwritten laws, the eternal verities whispered by the gods, these are the deep roots, the enduring form. The written laws of men. He gestured outwards, towards the unseen agora. They are the river's course, shaped by the land, shifting the silt, sometimes flooding, sometimes running dry, but always seeking the sea of order. Solon understood the flow. Draco's harsh law code AC, 621 BCE mandated death for most crimes. Solon's reforms EC, 594 BCE introduced fairer trials, debt relief, and classes based on wealth, not birth, laying foundations for Athenian democracy. Demos frowned, unconvinced. But if justice flows, how can we know it? How can we build a city on shifting sand? A bead of sweat traced a path through the dust on his temple. The scent of baking bread from a nearby dwelling grew stronger, mingling with the herbal air. Ariston picked up the olive wreath. Its supple branches yielded slightly to his touch, cool and resilient. He placed it gently on Demos's unruly dark curls. The young man stiffened, startled. Feel its weight, Demos. Light, yet present. It does not crush the head, yet it marks the victor. It grew under the same sun that hardened Draco's stone tablets. Is this crown justice? He let the question hang. It honors the enduring effort, the discipline, the training, the striving for excellence that flows through a specific moment of victory. Justice seeks the enduring principle fairness, balance, within the flowing chaos of human conflict. We build not on sand, but on the bedrock of these principles, even as we channel the unpredictable waters above. He removed the wreath, its faint, earthy scent lingering near Demos's brow, and returned it to Athena's altar. The marble felt warm now where it rested. A respectful silence fell, thicker than before. Cleon stared at the wreath, his earlier question deepening. Demos touched his head where the leaves had rested, the abstract suddenly made tactile. The morning sun bathed the courtyard in clear, golden light, illuminating dust motes dancing above the warmed stones. From the street, beyond the gate came the clatter of hooves, and the call of a potter advertising his wares, the flowing life of the city, seeking its own precarious, vital order. The thyme's fragrance spiked as Ariston brushed against a plant near the cistern. He watched his students, their young faces etched with the effort of grappling with the river's current, finding their footing on the bedrock beneath the flow. The scroll of Heraclitus lay open, the words always stark and challenging in the bright Attic morning. The wreath, bathed in sunlight, seemed less a symbol of past victory and more a promise of the enduring effort required to understand the ceaseless stream. The marble bench radiated a comfortable heat. The distant lyre music started again, a hesitant melody searching for its harmony. Demas opened his mouth, a new question forming on lips still tasting the cool water, and the intangible honor of the olive leaves. The scent of thyme hung sharp and green in the noon heat as Clon finally broke the silence. "Master," he began, his voice thoughtful, tracing the whorls in the wooden stool, "if justice is the bedrock beneath the river's flow, how do we recognize it when the waters are muddied? Like the whispers now about Philip in Macedon. Some call his strength a threat, others see alliance. Where is the bedrock there?" A laden donkey brayed sharply from the street, its complaint echoing off the sun-baked walls. Athenian democracy thrived on fierce debate in the Pnyx assembly, where citizens argued foreign policy, often swayed by skilled orators like Demosthenes, who vehemently opposed Macedonian expansion. Ariston didn't answer immediately. He picked up a fallen sprig of thyme from the flagstones, rolling it between thumb and forefinger, releasing a burst of pungent fragrance that momentarily cut through the heavier aromas of heated marble and dust. He walked to the cistern, its water now shimmering with captured sunlight, warm to the touch near the rim but cool deeper down. He dipped the thyme sprig briefly, watching the droplets cling. "The bedrock, Cleon," he said, turning, the wet herb glistening. "It's not a map, but a compass. It points not to easy answers, but to the questions we must ask. Does Philip's strength serve his people's good? Or merely his own ambition? Does an alliance strengthen Athenian or Rete, our excellence, our freedom? Or does it erode it, making us tributaries to another's river?" He placed the damp thyme beside the olive wreath on Athena's altar. The cool droplets darkened the pale stone. Diplomatic olive wreaths were carried by Athenian envoys, theoroi, symbolizing peaceful intent and the city's divine sanction during delicate negotiations. Demos leaned forward, the brief honor of wearing the wreath still vivid. But the assembly shouts. Demosthenes thunders, wolf others murmur opportunity. "The waters are muddied, master. How does the bedrock help us see?" "The bedrock," Ariston countered, his voice gaining the steady rhythm of a man walking familiar. "Stony ground demands we step out of the current. It asks for reason, logos, not just passion. It asks whose voice speaks for the enduring good of the polis, not just for today's fear or tomorrow's gold. It asks if the path leads towards greater harmony or deeper strife." He gestured towards the scroll of Heraclitus. "Even the river, in its endless flow, has banks. The bedrock defines the channel. Our reason, trained by inquiry like this," he indicated the courtyard, "the students, must discern the true banks when the flood comes. The olive grows slowly, Cleon, Demos. Its value isn't seized in haste, but cultivated with patient wisdom. Olive trees took decades to mature, symbolizing the long-term perspective Athenian statesmen ideally sought, contrasting sharply with the often short-term demands of the assembly crowd. The fierce Attic sun beat down, warming the marble bench Ariston returned to until it radiated heat through his himation. The scent of thyme intensified, almost dizzying in the stillness. From beyond the walls came the distinct, rhythmic clang of a bronze, smith's hammer purposeful, shaping resistant metal. Demos chewed his lip, the abstract wrestling match between flow and foundation playing out on his furrowed brow. Cleon gazed at the altar, his eyes moving between the simple wreath, symbol of rooted endurance, and the damp thyme sprig. Fleeting yet fiercely aromatic, the clamor of the distant agora swelled haggling voices. The scrape of cartwheels, a snatch of flute song, a turbulent river flowing just beyond the sanctuary of the courtyard wall. The olive leaves seemed to hold their green defiance against the bleaching light. Ariston watched his students, the future citizens who would one day stand in that clamorous current, and hoped the bedrock within them would run deep. The smith's hammer rang again, a sharp counterpoint to the rising murmur of the city. The warmed marble pressed against his thigh. The thyme's scent was a sharp, clean line in the thick afternoon air. Demos shifted, drawing breath to voice the confusion churning within him, the clash of Philip's shadow and Heraclitus's river, making the very ground of Athens feel less sure beneath his sandals. The fierce Attic sun began its westward descent, casting long, cool shadows across Ariston's courtyard. The debate had settled, leaving only the resonant echoes of Heraclitus's river and Solon's laws hanging in the thyme-scented air. Cleon and Demos had departed, their footsteps fading into the city's rhythmic hum. Potters' wheels spinning, bronze ringing against bronze, the distant surge of voices from the agora. Ariston remained on the sun-warmed marble bench, the olive wreath resting once more upon Athena's altar. Its leaves, though plucked days ago, still held a whisper of resilience, their earthy fragrance mingling with the dry stone and the sharp, sun-baked thyme. He traced a vein in the marble, now cooling as twilight blood into the sky. Lycos's victory seemed distant now, like the fading cry of the owl from the Acropolis. Philip of Macedon's shadow lingered at the edges of thought, a turbulence downstream. Yet here, in this quiet space, the bedrock endured the unchanging pursuit of logos, the slow growth of wisdom, the roots of the olive tree gripping Attic stone. Athenian democracy, for all its clamor, rested on these foundations. Debate seeking truth, laws channeling chaos, citizens striving for a rite. The oil lamp flickered to life beside the altar, its flame small but defiant against the encroaching blue, dark. The wreath's silhouette deepened, a circle of peace against the white stone. From the street, a lyre's melody drifted, a fragment of Sappho, tender and fleeting. Ariston closed his eyes. The city's pulse softened. The hammer's clang ceased, the agora's murmur receded like a tide, and even the thyme's pungency gentled into the cool night air. Only the stars remained, ancient and watchful, mirroring the quiet fire within the philosopher's wary mind. The marble's chill seeped into his bones, a grounding counterpoint to the day's heat and haste. The wreath's weight seemed to deepen, not of leaves, but of centuries. Of Olympian victors, brides crowned in hope, envoys bearing peace, and the unyielding grace of Athena's sacred tree. The olive wreath grows heavy. Ariston's world fades. Carry this peace, woven of stone, thyme, and enduring light. Sleep well, time, weaver. Gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight, we sail to the Roman Empire. Feel the cool, insistent rush of flowing water against your palm. Breathe in the sharp, resinous perfume of cypress trees standing sentinel in the dusk. And let history rock you to sleep. Marcus Aurelius Sabinus ran a calloused hand along the smooth, cool seam of the fistula plumbi, the heavy lead pipe. It thrummed faintly, a deep, vital pulse resonating through the metal, carrying the lifeblood of Rome itself. High on the arcade of the Aqua Claudia, the world stretched out below him in the fading light, the patchwork quilt of rooftops, the dark ribbon of the Tiber, the distant, hazy bulk of the Capitoline Hill, the scent of cypress, carried on a breeze from the sacred grove clinging to the nearby slope, cut through the ever-present dust of the Campagna. These lead pipes, meticulously cast in sections and joined with molten solder, formed the hidden veins of the city, channeling water from distant springs to public fountains, baths, and the homes of the privileged. He pressed his ear against the pipe. The sound within was a low, powerful rush, not a river's roar, but the contained, purposeful song of water mastered, flowing with relentless gravity towards the thirsty metropolis. Pressure holds steady, Decanus called out young Gaius, wiping sweat and dust from his brow. He tapped the bronze calyx embedded in the stone channel just upstream of the pipe junction. The regulated jet arsed cleanly into the settling basin, proof the precious flow remained unimpeded. Roman aqueducts employed sophisticated inverted siphons, thus using lead pipes like these to cross deep valleys, maintaining pressure where gravity channels alone couldn't flow. Sabinus nodded, the cool metal soothing against his skin after hours of inspecting sun-baked travertine blocks. Good. Secure the access cap. We lose the light. He watched as Gaius heaved the heavy lead and bronze cap into place, the final thunk echoing slightly in the quietening evening. Below, the arcade's shadow stretched long and cool across the parched landscape. The scent of cypress deepened, mingling with the damp, mineral smell rising from the channel and the faint metallic tang of the lead. Descending the service stairs carved into the massive pier, Sabinus felt the familiar ache in his knees, the legacy of decades spent scaling Rome's stone arteries. At the base, he paused by a small overflow spillway. Cupping his hands, he plunged them into the clear, shockingly cold water gushing out. It was pure mountain-born, tasting faintly of limestone. He splashed his face and neck, the icy shock banishing fatigue, the droplets catching the last golden rays. Water commissioners meticulously monitored flow rates using calibrated bronze pipes at distribution points, like the calyx, ensuring equitable allocation throughout the city's complex network. He listened to the water's song, hear a cheerful gurgle, as it escaped the confines of the aqueduct, soon to be swallowed again by the earth. It was a constant presence. This water he served a force of nature bent to imperial will, yet retaining its wild, cleansing chill. He dried his hands on his coarse tunic, the dampness evaporating quickly in the warm air. The cypress scent was stronger now, almost pungent, a clean, green counterpoint to the stone and water. Somewhere high above, an owl called, its cry echoing the vastness of the twilight. The lead pipe overhead, hidden within the arch, continued its deep, resonant thrum, a hidden heartbeat beneath the silent march of the mighty arcade. The first stars pricked the violet sky over the distant Apennines. The cool water's memory lingered on his skin. The cypress whispered secrets to the gathering night. The engineer's gaze followed the line of the aqueduct, a stone spine against the darkening plain, carrying its liquid treasure towards the sleeping, unseen city. The rhythmic pulse of the water within the pipe was a lullaby sung by mountains to the heart of Rome, The last sliver of sun vanished behind the distant ridge, painting the aqueduct's travertine arches in deep indigo and cold silver. Sabinus descended the final steps, his sandals scraping on worn stone, the scent of damp mortar and ancient dust rising with each footfall. Below the arcade, the Aqua Claudia vanished into the earth, a hidden river flowing towards the Aventine hill. Gaius waited by the small maintenance shed nestled against the colossal pier, the scent of hot lamp oil and stale bread already threading through the crisp cypress air. Decanus. Gaius greeted, holding out a coarse linen towel. Sabinus wiped the grit of the arcade from his face and arms, the rough fabric catching on calluses earned from handling stone and lead. Inside the shed, the air was thick and still, smelling of leather harnesses, iron tools, and the faint, metallic tang of solder. Gaius lit a small clay lamp. Its flickering flame cast dancing shadows on stacks of spare calluses and coils of lead sheeting. Roman engineers often maintained way stations along aqueducts for maintenance crews, storing tools and materials vital for repairs. Sabinus opened a heavy wooden chest, the hinges protesting, and pulled out a worn bronze dioptra, a sighting instrument for checking gradients. He ran his thumb over its precise markings, cool and smooth. Report from the Castellum Divisorium on the Caelian, Gaius said, unrolling a scrap of papyrus. The ink smudged slightly. Minor sediment buildup in the fistula, feeding the baths of Caracalla. Flow reduced by maybe 1 part in 20. Not critical, but... He trailed off, looking at Sabinus. The lamp flame guttered, making the shadows leap. Sabinus grunted, placing the dioptra back. Sediment. The eternal enemy. Even the clearest spring water carried the mountain's dust. He pictured the labyrinthine network beneath the city, lead pipes branching like veins, feeding fountains, therma, private domus. A blockage here could mean a dry fountain there, a tepid bath elsewhere. The complex system relied on precise pressure gradients. A partial blockage upstream could starve branches downstream, requiring careful isolation and flushing. "We'll need to isolate the Caracalla spur tomorrow," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the small space. "Check the junction valve near the Porta Capena." Likely grit caught in the seating. He imagined the cool rush of water, suddenly silenced in that section, the heavy lead valve groaning shut. Gaius nodded, jotting notes on a wax tablet. Proculus's team is near the Temple of Diana. They could assist with the flush. "Send a runner at first light," Sabinus confirmed. He picked up a short section of replacement pipe, its new lead surface cool and unnaturally bright in the lamplight. He hefted it, feeling its dense, malleable weight. Lead pipes, cis-and-fistulate, were cast in sand molds, often stamped with the manufacturer's name and the emperor's approval, ensuring quality control across the vast empire. His thumb found the faint impression FABRIATVMSVBIMP, CLAVDIO, made under Emperor Claudius. Decades of service, yet this piece remained unused, waiting. He ran a finger along the seam where molten solder would one day flow like liquid silver, sealing Rome's veins. Stepping back outside, the night air was a shock after the shed's closeness. The cypress scent was profound now, almost medicinal, mingling with the damp earth smell from the aqueduct's overflow channel nearby. The arcade loomed above, a skeletal giant against the star-strewn sky. Far below, in the dark valley, fireflies winked like tiny, wandering stars. From the pipe access point high above, the deep, resonant thrum of flowing water was a constant vibration felt through the soles of his sandals, the heartbeat of the Claudia, steady and strong. The city itself was a distant constellation of flickering lights, a silent testament to the hidden river, flowing tirelessly towards it. Sabinus tilted his head back, breathing in the cool air sharp with cypress and stone. The lamp in Gaius's hand cast a small, warm pool of light against the monumental darkness, a fragile beacon beside the enduring pulse of the water and the silent watch of the trees. The lead section felt heavy and cool in his grip, a promise of tomorrow's labor. Somewhere in the hills beyond, the spring that fed the Claudia bubbled from the earth, cold and endless, beginning its long, disciplined journey to the heart of the world. The Spicus narrowed where the siphon plunged into the valley's throat. Sabinus crouched, the rough travertine scraping his knees through his tunic. Here, the Aqua Claudia surrendered its open channel, funneled into a massive, triple-banked lead pipe encased in protective stone. The air grew damp and cool, smelling sharply of wet rock, cold metal, and the ever-present ghost of cypress drifting down from the slopes. He pressed his palm flat against the lead casing. The vibration was stronger here, a deep, resonant thrumming that traveled up his arm, the sound of pent water straining against its confines. These pressurized siphons, Ventert, were engineering marvels, using the water's own weight to push it uphill on the far side of valleys, defying gravity's pull. See here, Decanus. Gaius pointed his oil lamp closer. Condensation beaded on the dark lead like cold sweat. A faint, almost invisible seam near the junction showed a hairline weep, not a leak yet, but a promise of one. The dampness smelled metallic, ancient. Sabinus grunted, tracing the seam with a calloused fingertip. The lead felt unnaturally cold, sucking the warmth from his skin. The solder weakens. Winter's frost working it loose. He imagined the immense pressure inside, the mountain-borne water pushing relentlessly against this thin metal skin. Lid pipes, though malleable and easy to seal, were vulnerable to temperature shifts and ground movement, requiring constant vigilance from the Aquariate maintenance crews. He took the lamp from Gaius, holding it low. The flickering light revealed the meticulous craftsmanship, the smooth, poured seams where molten solder, plumbum album, had fused the pipe sections decades before. The heavy lead flanges bolted to the stone cradle. Skilled plumbers, Plumberry, used iron tongs and clay crucibles to pour molten solder tin, lead alloy at over 250 degrees C, creating watertight seals crucial for siphon integrity. A single failure here wouldn't just mean a dry fountain. It could unleash a torrent capable of undermining the massive stone supports, collapsing the siphon, and severing the Claudia's flow to half of Rome. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sabinus's shoulders, as tangible as the cold stone beneath his knees. "Mark it," he ordered, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Gaius scraped a chalk X onto the damp stone beside the weeping seam. Priority for Proculus's crew after the Caracalla flush. Needs recasting. He straightened slowly, joints protesting, the damp chill seeping into his bones. The relentless thrum of the water seemed louder now, a contained roar vibrating through the stone floor. He placed his hand back on the pipe. It pulsed like the artery of a giant. This was the hidden muscle of the Claudia, the brute force harnessed by Roman will and solder. Above them, through the access shaft, the last indigo faded to black, pricked with hard, bright stars. The scent of cypress was fainter here, buried under the mineral damp and cold lead. They retreated up the narrow service stairs, carved into the siphon's massive pier, leaving the pressurized darkness behind, the chalk mark a small, urgent plea against the water's ceaseless push. The lamp cast long, leaping shadows on the wet walls. The vibration hummed in Sabinus's teeth. The metallic taste of the air clung to the back of his throat. Tomorrow's burden already felt heavy, but the pulse of the water, steady and strong within its leaden veins, was a rhythm as old as the hills it conquered. The scent of hot metal and burnt resin bit the air before dawn. Sabinus stood ankle deep in cold runoff, watching Proculus's crew wrestle the heavy clay crucible into position beneath the weeping pipe joint. The chalk X glared white in the flickering torchlight. High above, the siphon stone casing blocked the stars, turning the workspace into a vault of shadows and echoing drips. The thrum of pressurized water vibrated up through Sabinus's sandals. A constant, low warning. "Ready the Foruminationum," Proculus barked. A burly Plumbarius hefted iron tongues, gripping a section of thick lead solder rod. Another fed chunks of pine resin into the crucible's fire. The resin sparked, releasing thick, acrid smoke that clashed violently with the clean cypress scent still clinging to Sabinus's tunic from the slope above. Roman plumbers used pine resin as flux, cleaning the lead surfaces before soldering to ensure a perfect, watertight bond. Sabinus eyed the hairline seam. Condensation still beaded along its length, betraying the immense force held back by a sliver of failing metal. Valve secured upstream. Sabinus asked Gaius, who stood tense nearby, holding spare solder rods. Closed and braced Decanus. "Pressure should be dropping." Gaius trailed off, listening. The deep thrum had lessened slightly, the pipe's vibration easing from a growl to a murmur. But the tension didn't leave the men's shoulders. Recasting a joint under pressure, even reduced, was dancing with the river god. "Now!" Proculus shouted. The Plumbarius thrust the solder rod into the crucible's molten heart. It softened instantly, dripping like liquid silver. Another worker, face shielded by a leather apron, scraped the weeping seam fiercely with a bronze pick, exposing fresh, bright lead beneath the oxide. The smell of hot, clean metal bloomed sharp and urgent. Soldering temperatures exceeded 250 degrees C. A momentary lapse could weaken the pipe or cause a catastrophic blowout if pressure surged. Sabinus moved closer, ignoring the heat radiating from the crucible. His eyes tracked the Plumbarius's tongues as they lifted a glowing globule of molten solder. The man's hand was steady, guided by years of sealing Rome's hidden veins. With practiced precision, he touched the molten silver to the freshly scraped seam. A furious hiss erupted, steam billowing as the solder flowed, seeking the gap, driven by heat and gravity. The acrid resin flux smoke stung Sabinus's eyes. He blinked, focusing on the molten metal's path. It crept along the seam, bright against the dull lead, sealing the weakness inch by agonizing inch. The pipe shuddered faintly, a tremor running through the stone cradle as the solder cooled and gripped. Proculus leaned in, a polished bronze mirror reflecting torchlight onto the newly sealed joint. Solid, he grunted after a tense minute, running a calloused thumb over the smooth, cooling metal. No weep. Good flow. Relief, unspoken but palpable, eased the crew's postures. The solder gleamed dully, a scar of silver on the dark pipe, holding back the mountain's force. Sabinus finally exhaled, the cold damp of the siphon chamber seeping back into his awareness. The thrum was returning, stronger now, as pressure rebuilt, but it was the steady song of control, not the threat of rupture. He nodded to Proculus. Clean work. Stepping back, his sandals slipped on wet stone. He caught himself, hand brushing the cold travertine wall. Above, through the access shaft, the sky was paling to gray. The cypress scent was gone, burned away by resin and hot metal, leaving only the damp stone, cold lead, and the faint, clean promise of water flowing true. The crucible fire spat a final ember. The new solder joint pulsed with latent heat. The siphon's deep vibration settled into its familiar, relentless rhythm. Gaius wiped sweat and soot from his brow, a grin breaking through the grime. Dawn was coming, and the Aqua Claudia still sang its unwavering course towards the waking city. The lead pipe held, its hidden wound sealed, a testament to solder, skill, and the silent, vital struggle beneath the arches. The rising sun gilded the highest arches of the Aqua Claudia as Sabinus walked the final stretch of the arcade towards the city walls. Below, the morning haze clung to the Tiber, softening the jumble of rooftops and temples. The scent of cypress had yielded to the city's waking breath, wood smoke, baking bread, damp mortar, and the faint, inevitable tang of humanity. The repaired siphon joint, miles behind him now, was a silent victory sealed in silver solder. Ahead lay the Castellum Divisorium. On the Calian hill, the beating heart, where the Claudia's flow, was divided for its final journey through Rome's veins. He entered the cool, vaulted chamber of the Castellum. Sunlight streamed through high, narrow windows, illuminating dancing dust motes above the deep, rectangular settling basin. The water here was preternaturally clear and still, a mirror reflecting the vaulted ceiling after its turbulent journey. These distribution tanks were engineering masterpieces, using gravity and calibrated bronze outlet pipes, calloused, to split the main flow precisely for different city districts and priorities. The familiar deep thrum was muted here, replaced by the gentle lap of water against stone and the metallic drip from bronze fittings. The air smelled clean and wet, overlaid with the cool scent of stone and a faint, lingering metallic note from the pipes. Decanus Sabinus, a stout man in a cleaner tunic than Sabinus's own, emerged from a side archway, wax tablet in hand. Lucius Verus, the Aquarius overseer for this district. The Claudia runs strong this morning. Sediment cleared from the Caracalla spur, good pressure restored. He tapped his tablet. Your report on the siphon. Giant recast. Holding. Sabinus's voice echoed slightly in the chamber. He moved to the basin's edge, looking down into the shimmering depths. Small particles of silt, disturbed by the overnight flush, drifted like lazy constellations towards the bottom. Pressure normalized before dawn. He glanced at the array of bronze calluses protruding from the far wall, each leading to a lead pipe feeding a different sector. Public fountains, La Nymphea, had priority, followed by bathhouses, Thermaid, then private homes, a strict hierarchy, ensuring the populace's basic needs were met first. He watched a technician adjust a valve with a long bronze key, a faint hiss accompanying the subtle shift. In the water's surface tension, near one outlet, efficient as ever, Sabinus. Verus nodded, making a note. The Aventine branch was grumbling yesterday. Flow felt thin to the public fountain near the Porta Trigemina. Probably just debris in the fistula after the rains. But he gestured towards the corresponding calyx. Sabinus crouched, dipping his fingers into the basin. The water was shockingly cold, tasting pure and faintly stony. He felt its gentle current tug at his skin. I'll trace it, he said, rising. The constant vigilance. A blocked pipe meant thirsty families, grumbling citizens, a ripple of discontent. He accepted a small jug of water, drawn directly from the basin, drinking deeply. The cold purity was a visceral reward. This was the end of the mountain stream's journey, yet the beginning of its service. Leaving the Castellum, he descended into the warren of streets near the Aventine. The Claudia's presence became hidden, inferred only by the occasional graded access point in the cobbles, or the distant sound of flowing water from a side alley. The city's sounds intensified: cartwheels clattering, vendors hawking wares, the rhythmic clang from a blacksmith's forge. The smell changed. Baking bread gave way to fish stalls, then the pungent aroma of a fuller's workshop using stale urine for cleaning cloth. He found the public fountain, a simple marble basin fed by a bronze lion's head spout. A small queue of women and slaves waited with amphorae. The flow was weak, a thin, spluttering stream rather than a robust cascade. Sabinus knelt by the grated cover near the base. The familiar scent of wet stone and cold metal rose as he lifted it. Inside, the lead pipe leading to the spout felt cool. He pressed his ear to it. The flow sounded thin, choked. Further down the narrow street, near a bakery, he found another access point. Here, the pipe vibrated strongly. The blockage was localized. Gaius. Sabinus called to his shadow, already unshouldering their tools. Spanner and the flush rod. Upstream valve here. He pointed. The murmur of the waiting crowd at the fountain was a quiet pressure at his back, more insistent than the thrum of the siphon. The cool metal of the pipe valve cover met his fingers, its geometric pattern worn smooth by generations of maintenance. The scent of warm bread from the nearby bakery mingled oddly with the mineral smell of the water beneath his hands. The rhythm of the city pulsed around him, a different kind of current, equally demanding, equally vital. The flush rod clanked as Gaius assembled it. The upstream valve groaned as Sabinus began to turn it. The thin, protesting sound of the water in the pipe shifted pitch. The bronze spanner bit into the worn valve cap. Sabinus heaved, muscles straining against decades of mineral crust. A gritty screech echoed in the narrow street, louder than the baker's rhythmic kneading nearby. Gaius braced the heavy iron flush rod, its tapered end hovering over the open access point. The lead pipe below felt tense, the thin, choked gurgle within a stark contrast to the vibrant city sounds. The clatter of pans from the bakery, the murmur of the waiting queue at the spluttering fountain just down the lane, the distant cry of a street vendor. "Now!" Sabinus gritted. Gaius drove the rod deep into the pipe's throat. Sabinus wrenched the valve fully open. A cough, a gurgle, then a furious, pent-up whoosh exploded from the pipe at the fountain. Cheers erupted down the street, followed by the clear, musical splash of water hitting the marble basin, strong and true. A spray of murky water, laden with grit, and a small, twisted scrap of leather, a lost sandal strap, shot from the access point around the flush rod, soaking Gaius's legs and splattering the cobbles. The smell was earthy, wet, and momentarily foul, quickly overwhelmed by the clean, cold scent of unleashed water and the warm, yeasty perfume of baking bread. Sabinus leaned back, releasing the spanner. The pipe beneath his hand vibrated with a healthy, powerful thrum, no longer strained. He wiped gritty water from his face with his forearm. Gaius grinned, pulling the dripping rod free. The blockage was gone, flushed down a secondary drain towards the Tiber. Lead pipes, fistulae, were often stamped with the emperor's name and the pipe, maker's mark, a quality control measure ensuring accountability across the vast network. Sabinus peered into the access hole. Even in the dim light, he could see the imperial stamp IMP. Vespasianus, still clear on the inner curve, untouched by the decades of flowing water. Public fountains, nymphaea, held the highest priority in Rome's water distribution, a deliberate civic policy ensuring access for all citizens before private baths or homes received their share. He replaced the heavy access cover, its geometric pattern cool and familiar under his palm. Down the street, the fountain sang its restored song. Women laughed as they filled their amphorae, the clear water catching the morning sun. The baker emerged, wiping flour, dusted hands, offering a silent nod of thanks and a warm, round loaf wrapped in linen. The scent of it, fresh and comforting, mingled with the damp stone and the lingering mineral freshness of the water. The Castellum Divisorium upstream, with its precisely calibrated bronze outlets, ensured this equitable flow, a testament to Roman engineering's focus on public utility and order. Sabinus accepted the bread, its warmth a counterpoint to the cool pipe beneath his hand. He looked up, past the jumbled rooftops, following the unseen path of the Aqua Claudia. From the cold mountain spring, through the soaring arcades, down the throbbing siphon, into the quiet Castellum, and now here, life pouring onto sun-warmed cobbles. The cypress scent from the distant hills was a memory now, replaced by the city's vibrant, messy breath, bread, damp wool, humanity, and the ever-present, clean whisper of water, flowing endlessly from the hills to the heart of the world. The lead pipe pulsed steadily, a hidden rhythm beneath the bustling street. The fountain's melody mingled with the city's waking. Hum, the warm bread scent wrapped around the cool memory of mountain water. The engineer's calloused hand rested lightly on the access cover, feeling the vital current beneath. The marble fountain basin shimmered. Sabinus's world softened at the edges. The steady pulse of the water within the pipe was the true lullaby, sung not just for Rome, but for the mountains that fed her and the hands that kept the sacred flow alive. The olive groves slept on distant slopes. The cypress stood watch. The aqueduct's shadow stretched long and cool. The lead pipe grows heavy. Sabinus's gaze followed the dancing water in the fountain. The scent of fresh bread and cold stone filled the air. Carry this peace, woven of flowing water and enduring stone. Sleep well, time weaver. Gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight, we journey the Silk Road beneath the Han Dynasty's watchful stars. Feel the coarse, insulating warmth of camel wool against your cheek. Breathe the sharp, acrid tang of gunpowder carried on the desert wind, and let history rock you to sleep. The rhythmic thud, plod of laden camel feet was the drumbeat of Luwei's world. Dust, fine as milled flour and tasting of ancient stone, coated his lips, his eyelashes. The coarse camel, wool blanket draped over his shoulders against the Gobi's evening chill. Ahead, the setting sun bled crimson and gold across the endless dun expanse, staining the distant, jagged teeth of the Tian Shan Mountains purple. The caravan stretched like a weary serpent behind him, 50 Bactrian camels, snorting and grumbling, swaying under bales of shimmering shoe brocade, pungent sacks of Sichuan pepper, and sturdy amphorae sealed with wax. Han merchants carried precious silk westwards, trading for Central Asian horses, Roman glass, and Persian lapis lazuli along routes guarded by the Great Wall's western outposts. Li Wei shifted on his sturdy Mongolian pony, the worn leather saddle creaking. His hand drifted instinctively to the hard, cool circle pressing against his chest beneath layers of tunic and lamellar armor, the bi-disc of pale, Heechin jade, his father's talisman, smooth as river water and heavy with silent promise. Sun's kissing the sand, Wei, rumbled Lao Chen, riding beside him. The veteran guard spat a stream of brown betel nut juice, the scent sharp and earthy amidst the dust. He adjusted the long Jai halberd slung across his back. Time to circle the wagons. Smells like trouble on this wind. He sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. Beyond the dust and camel musk, a faint, unmistakable sting carried the metallic bite of saltpeter, the sulfur tang of gunpowder. While not yet used widely in warfare, Han alchemists perfected gunpowder, a hu yao fire medicine, for fireworks and signals. Caravans often carried small quantities for emergencies or trade. It meant others were near. Bandits, perhaps, or another caravan wary in the vastness. Lai Wei nodded curtly, his eyes scanning the darkening horizon. He signaled the lead camel driver, whose piercing whistle cut through the grumbles and jingling harness bells. The great beasts began to kneel, groaning and puffing clouds of vapor into the rapidly cooling air. The scent of gunpowder grew stronger as they passed a heavily guarded cart. Near the caravan master's palanquin, its cargo likely the precious, volatile powder itself, packed in waxed leather bags within lacquered boxes. Li Wei dismounted, his boots sinking into the soft, cold sand. He helped secure the perimeter, driving iron-tipped stakes for the felt tents, the coarse camel wool of his gloves snagging on the rough hemp rope. The jade disc shifted against his sternum, a constant, cool anchor. Inside the flickering circle of campfires later, the world shrank. The vast, star-sprinkled black vault above felt immense, pressing down. Li Wei huddled close to the flames, savoring the heat on his face, the smell of roasting millet cakes, and stewed, dried mutton battling the lingering gunpowder, scent drifting from the guarded cart. He unwrapped a portion of hard Bing flatbread, chewing methodically. Across the fire, Lao Chen meticulously cleaned his halberd blade. The whetstone's scrape a familiar lullaby. Li Wei's fingers found the jade disc beneath his tunic. Pulling the leather thong over his head, he held it in his calloused palm. The firelight danced on its polished surface, revealing subtle, milky veins swirling within the pale green stone. These bai discs, often buried with nobles, symbolized heaven and were thought to protect travelers and grant safe passage between realms. It felt cool, heavy, imbued with the stillness of deep mountains, a world away from the gritty sand and nervous camels. He traced its perfect circle with a thumb, the smoothness absolute. His father's voice echoed in memory. "Hold the sky in your hand, son. Remember the center." A camel coughed nearby, a wet, rattling sound. A sentry's low call echoed in the darkness beyond the firelight. The scent of gunpowder, though faint now, was a serpent coiled at the edge of their fragile oasis of warmth and light. Li Wei slipped the jade disc back beneath his tunic, its cool weight settling against his skin. He pulled the thick camel wool blanket tighter, its familiar itch of comfort. The fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows that merged with the vast darkness of the desert. The bai disc pulsed faintly with cold against his chest. The camel wool scratched his neck. The ghost of gunpowder teased his nostrils. He stared into the embers, listening to the desert's night sounds, the sigh of wind over dunes, the shifting sand, the distant, mournful cry of some unseen creature, and the steady, rhythmic chewing of the camels, grounding him in the immense, watchful silence of the Silk Road. The cold seeped up from the sand beneath his blanket. The sentry's silhouette moved against the star field. The jade felt like a piece of the cold, distant moon held close. The caravan guard's eyelids grew heavy, lulled by the camel's chewing and the fire's dying breath. The scent of blood hit them. Before the sight, a coppery tang, slicing through the cold desert dawn, sharp and nauseating against the lingering ghost of gunpowder and camel musk. Li Wei reined in his pony hard, the animal snorting and sidestepping. Ahead, where the trail curved around a rocky outcrop, The vanguard had halted, grim silence replacing the usual morning bustle. Lao Chen spat. The betel juice a dark stain on the pale sand. Tian na. He breathed, the curse barely audible. The attackers had struck at dawn's first light, catching the smaller caravan utterly unprepared. Scattered like broken toys were 3 heavy, laden ox carts, their wooden frames splintered, canvas covers slashed and flapping. Debris littered the ground, spilled millet, trampled bolts of undyed hemp cloth, shattered pottery. And the bodies, 8 dozen, maybe more. Merchants, drivers, guards still tangled in their bedrolls. The sand around them was stained dark, almost black in the harsh morning light. Carrion birds, dark specks against the immense blue sky, already circled high above, their harsh cries the only sound besides the restless shifting of their own camels and the nervous snorts of the horses. Bandit raids, often by Xiongnu horsemen or desperate desert tribes, were a brutal reality of Silk Road travel, forcing caravans to travel heavily guarded or pay exorbitant protection tolls. Li Wei's hand went to the jade, bide disc beneath his tunic. It felt unnaturally cold against his skin, a stark counterpoint to the rising sun warming his back. He scanned the rocks above the massacre site, his eyes searching for movement, for the glint of metal. Nothing. Just the oppressive stillness of death, and the relentless wind beginning to stir the sand, threatening to bury the evidence. Caravan Master Deng, his face ashen beneath his broad, brimmed hat, pushed his pony forward. Swift, merciless, he muttered, surveying the carnage. They took the horses, the valuables, left the book. He gestured towards the spilled grain and cloth. Scavengers now. Orders snapped through the tense air. Guards fanned out, weapons drawn, Lao Chen hefting his ji, others knocking arrows to composite bows. They scoured the rocky slopes, checking crevices, scanning the horizon. The search yielded only grim trophies, a broken Xiongnu-style recurve bow, its sinew string snapped, and a handful of crude, barbed arrows fletched with hawk feathers, scattered near the body of a guard who'd clearly fought back. Xiongnu arrows were often poisoned with aconite, or viper venom, making even minor wounds potentially fatal on the remote road. Li Wei dismounted near one of the shattered carts. His boots crunched on broken shards of a celadon vase, its beautiful green glaze now just sharp fragments. He crouched, the coarse camel wool of his trousers scraping against the gritty sand. Beside a sprawled figure, a young man. No merchant, perhaps a guard's apprentice, lay a small, trampled silk pouch. Using the tip of his knife, Li Wei nudged it open. Inside, half buried in sand, gleamed 2 small, raw sapphires the color of a deep mountain lake, and a single, perfectly round pearl. Hidden treasure missed in the killer's haste. He didn't touch them. They felt tainted. Nothing living up there. Lao Chen reported, rejoining him, his voice a low growl. He wiped sweat and dust from his brow with a forearm, his eyes hard. Gone like desert ghosts. Headed west, likely. Towards the next oasis. He spat again, his gaze lingering on the sapphires. Fools. Should have paid the toll or hired more steel. Master Deng approached, his expression grimly practical. We'll bury them. Quickly. The sand will do the rest soon enough. He looked at the sapphires. Leave them. Bad fortune. He turned, barking orders to begin the grisly task of dragging bodies into a shallow depression behind the rocks. Li Wei stood, the jade disc a cold. Heavy weight against his pounding heart. The sharp tang of blood filled his nostrils, overwhelming the lingering gunpowder, the camel wool, even the dusty air. He pulled the scratchy camel, wool blanket tighter around his shoulders. not against the morning chill, but against a deeper cold, the sudden, visceral understanding of the fragile thread their own caravan walked between prosperity and oblivion. The desert stretched endlessly, beautiful and pitiless. The Tian Shan Mountains watched, impassive. The carrion birds descended lower, their shadows flitting across the blood-stained sand like dark omens. His fingers tightened on the jade circle beneath his tunic, seeking its silent promise of heaven's protection, feeling only its ancient, unyielding cold. The guards worked in grim silence. The shovels bit into the yielding sand. The wind whispered secrets across the rocks, carrying the fading scent of iron and terror. The caravan master scanned the western horizon, his hand resting on the hilt of his Dao sword. The camels shifted uneasily, their soft grunts the only protest against the stillness of death. Li Wei remounted, his eyes never leaving the rocks, the desert holding its breath. The Jade Gate Pass rose from the desert like a mirage given form, towering rammed. Earth walls stained ochre by centuries of wind, bristling with hand banners snapping in the dry, grit-laced breeze. Relief washed through the caravan, palpable as cool water, as they passed beneath the massive timber gates. Dunhuang Sanctuary. The thud, plod of camel feet echoed differently here, muffled by packed earth and the sudden cacophony of human life within the Eosis walls. Dunhuang was a vital hand military garrison and trade hub, guarding the Silk Road's eastern approach and housing the famed Mogao Caves, where Buddhist art flourished alongside imperial administration. The air thickened instantly, a complex tapestry of scents overlaying the ever-present dust, roasting lamb fat from street stalls, pungent fermented bean paste, incense smoke from a nearby temple, animal dung, human sweat, and the sharp, metallic tang of gunpowder that now seemed woven into the very fabric of the place. Soldiers in lacquered leather armor patrolled the walls, their presence a stark reminder of the emperor's reach. Li Wei guided his pony through the crowded market street, the coarse camel wool blanket still draped over his shoulders, a familiar barrier against the stares and the press of bodies. His hand rested near the hilt of his Dao sword. Lao Chen rode close, eyes constantly scanning the throng, Uyghur merchants, hawking turquoise, Sogdian traders with bolts of vibrant dyes, Persian rug sellers, all mingling under the watchful eyes of Han officials in silk robes. The Han Dynasty actively policed the Silk Road, establishing garrison towns like Dunhuang to protect trade, collect tariffs, and project imperial power deep into Central Asia. Master Deng secured space within the fortified caravanserai, a vast courtyard surrounded by stables and storerooms. As the camels groaned and knelt, unloading began. Li Wei's task was the gunpowder cart. The lacquered boxes felt unnervingly light yet potent. He carried one with extreme care into a cool, stone-lined cellar, the acrid scent intensifying in the confined space. A Han quartermaster, face impassive, checked the imperial seal and weight, marking his wax tablet. Han alchemists guarded gunpowder formulas fiercely. Its military potential was understood, though still primarily used for fireworks, signals, and mining at this stage. Handle with reverence, guard Li. The quartermaster murmured, his voice echoing. This fire medicine carries the emperor's will. Later, washed and seeking solace, Li Wei climbed the worn steps to a section of the ramparts. The desert stretched vast and tawny beyond the walls, the Tian Shan a distant purple rampart. The setting sun painted the oasis in fiery hues. He pulled the jade bai disc from beneath his tunic, its smooth, cool surface a balm against the lingering gunpowder smell on his hands and the grit in his teeth. He held it towards the dying light. The pale Hessian jade seemed to glow from within, its milky veins like captured clouds. Jade was revered above gold in Han culture, symbolizing purity, immortality, and cosmic power. By disc specifically represented heaven and the Emperor's mandate. He traced its perfect circle, the ritual motion grounding him after the desert's brutality. Hold the sky in your hand. Remember the center. His father's words echoed. A quiet counterpoint to the raucous market sounds below. A commotion erupted near the garrison barracks, a sharp crackle followed by a brilliant flare of red light streaking into the twilight sky, trailing thick white smoke. A signal firework. The sharp, familiar tang of saltpeter and sulfur bloomed anew. Soldiers rushed towards the western wall. Voices rose in alarm. Lao Chen appeared beside him, breathing heavily. Scouts spotted dust cloud. Big. 5 lie west. Not traitors. His weathered face was grim. Xiongnu, likely. Saw the massacre site. Got bold. Li Wei's fist closed tightly around the jade disk. Its cool solidity felt suddenly fragile against the vastness of the desert and the approaching threat. Below, the market's cheerful chaos faltered, replaced by a spreading ripple of tension. Han soldiers streamed onto the battlements, crossbows loaded. The garrison commander's voice barked orders, sharp as the earlier fireworks report. The scent of fear began to mingle with the spices and gunpowder. The caravan was safe within the walls for now, but the desert had followed them. The jade pulsed cold against his palm, a piece of heaven held against the encroaching, earthbound darkness. The guard's eyes scanned the western horizon, where the last light bled away, leaving only a vast, starless void and the faint, ominous smudge of dust lit by the rising moon. The camel wool scratched his neck. The metallic ghost of gunpowder coated his tongue. The Bidis's weight was the only certainty in the tightening night. The ramparts beneath his boots vibrated with the movement of armored men. A distant drum began a slow, ominous beat. The cold desert wind carried the scent of steel and restless horses. Li Wei did not sheath his sword. The western ramparts thrummed with grim energy. Li Wei pressed his back against sun-baked earth bricks, the coarse camel wool of his tunic snagging on rough mortar. Below Dunhuang's walls, the moonlit desert churned, a dark, seething mass resolving into mounted figures. Their silhouettes jagged against the dunes. The rhythmic thunder of hooves vibrated through the stone beneath his boots. The air tasted of grit, cold metal, and the sharp, ever-present sting of gunpowder from the signal flare still fading overhead. Han signal towers used fire and smoke by day, explosive POW firecrackers by night, to relay warnings hundreds of li along the wall's spine. A cry went up near the gate towers. Xiongnu, followed by the sharp twang, thump of Han composite crossbows releasing. Heavy bolts hissed into the darkness. A scream high and animal, like, pierced the drumming hooves. Lao Chen grunted beside him, hefting his halberd. Hold the line. Aim for the horses. Xiongnu horsemen relied on mobility and archery, often feigning retreat to draw defenders out. Disciplined infantry holding fortified positions were their bane. The first wave hit like a sandstorm. Arrows, fletched with hawk feathers and tipped with bone or iron, whistled over the parapet. One thudded into the rammed earth inches from Li Wei's head, quivering. Another struck the soldier next to him in the shoulder, punching through leather lamellar with a wet thunk. The man gasped, collapsing. The coppery scent of fresh blood bloomed, sharp and nauseating against the gunpowder and dust. Li Wei risked a glance over the parapet. Ragged figures on wiry step ponies swirled below, loosing arrows upwards, their faces shadowed, eyes glinting in the torchlight. Some dismounted, scrambling towards the base of the wall with crude grappling hooks.
"Well!"
bellowed the garrison commander. Guards hauled heavy clay pots to the battlements. Li Wei grabbed one, the slick, pungent smell of rendered animal fat making his eyes water. He heaved it over the parapet, aiming for a cluster of figures trying to secure a hook. The pot shattered on rock below, dozing men and ponies in viscous fluid. A torch followed.
Whoosh!
Orange flame erupted, engulfing figures in writhing silhouettes. Screams, choked and horrifying, rose with the stench of burning hair and flesh, momentarily overpowering the desert cold and the metallic tang of battle. Boiling oil and pitch were devastating anti-siege weapons, causing horrific wounds and demoralizing attackers. An arrow grazed Li Wei's cheekbone. Warmth trickled down his face. He ducked back, wiping blood and grime with the back of his camel. Wool sleeve, the rough fibers scratching his skin. His hand instinctively flew to his chest. The jade disc was still there, cool and hard beneath his tunic, a silent counterpoint to the heat of the flames and the frantic pounding of his heart. Hold the sky. He drew his dao, its worn hilt familiar in his grip. Below, the Xiongnu horns wailed a shrill, ululating cry that raised the hairs on his neck. More figures surged from the darkness, climbing over the burning wreckage of the first assault. A grappling hook clattered onto the parapet nearby, its iron claws scraping stone. Lao Chen roared, swinging his jai in a brutal arc. It smashed into the first head to appear over the wall, a sickening crunch. "Repel the climbers," he bellowed. Li Wei lunged forward, his dao flashing in the flickering firelight. He parried a crude sword thrust from a snarling face streaked with ash and blood, then drove his blade down. The impact jarred his arm. The climber fell silently back into the inferno below. The jade pressed cold against his sternum, a fragment of stillness in the roaring chaos. The night air crackled with heat, screams, the clash of steel, and the relentless drumming of hooves beyond the wall. Torchlight flickered on sweating faces. The camel wool scraped his neck raw. The stench of burning fat and blood coated his throat. A dismounted Xiongnu warrior, face contorted, scrambled over the parapet right before him. Short sword raised, eyes wild with the reflected flames. Li Wei braced, the cool weight of the disc a silent anchor against the tide of fire and steel. The desert swallowed Dunhuang's walls like a slow, golden tide as the caravan pushed west. The air still tasted of ash and iron, the memory of screams clinging to the grit in Li Wei's throat. Behind them, stark against the dawn, pink sky, 3 rough, hewn posts stood near the garrison gate, empty now. The ragged Xiongnu prisoners, captured in the night's chaos, had met their end, at first light, a swift, brutal decapitation witnessed by the garrison and any traitor braving the chill morning air. Public executions served as grim deterrents, reinforcing Han authority and warning potential allies of the Xiongnu raiders along the vulnerable Silk Road. The coppery scent had hung thick for a terrible moment before the dry wind snatched it away. Lao Chen spat, a habitual gesture now laced with grim satisfaction. "Sends a message," he muttered, adjusting his jai halberd strapped to his saddle. His knuckles were raw, one eye swollen shut from a glancing blow during the wall scramble. Won't stop but it'll slow down, make think twice before sniffing around the gate again. He glanced at Li Wei. "You all right, boy?" Took a slice. Li Wei touched the linen bandage on his cheekbone, stiff with dried blood and dust. The sting was distant, muffled by a deeper numbness. "It's nothing," he rasped. His gaze kept sweeping the shimmering horizon, the vastness feeling newly treacherous. The image of those falling heads, the dull thuds, the sand drinking the blood, it flickered behind his eyes, superimposed on the endless dunes. He pulled the scratchy camel wool blanket higher, seeking its familiar discomfort, a grounding anchor against the hollow chill inside. The caravan moved slower. 2 guards were dead, buried hastily within Dunhuang's walls. 3 others bore serious wounds, jolting miserably on litters slung between camels. The usual morning chatter was absent, replaced by the rhythmic thud, plod of hooves, and the creak of harness leather. Master Deng rode at the front, his face set in stone, eyes constantly scanning the south, western approaches where the attackers had fled. Caravans often altered routes after attacks, seeking less exposed paths or hastening towards fortified oozes like Khotan or Kashgar. Li Wei's hand drifted inside his tunic. The jade disc met his fingers, cool and smooth, impossibly serene. He didn't pull it out. He simply held it, pressing its solid circle against his pounding heart. Hold the sky. Remember the center. His father's voice, usually a comfort, now felt thin against the vast, indifferent brutality of the desert. The disc hadn't stopped the arrow, hadn't silenced the screams, hadn't spared those men at the gate. What center was there in this chaos? Near midday, they passed the scorched scar on the desert floor, the site of the massacre they'd discovered days before. The sand had shifted, already erasing the burial mound. Only a few splintered shards of wood and a scrap of faded blue cloth, snagged on a thorny bush, remained. A dark patch in the sand might have been old blood, or just shadow. The wind whistled a mournful tune through the rocks. See. Lao Chen nodded towards the remnants, his voice low. Desert forgets fast, swallows everything. Men, caravans, battles, dust. He chewed his betel nut slowly. Only the road stays. And the mountains. He gestured towards the distant, snow-capped Pamirs, a hazy white line on the horizon. The Tian Shan and Pamir Mountains formed formidable natural barriers, their passes like the Jade Gate crucial. Dangerous choke, points on the Silk Road. Li Wei looked from the forgotten massacre to the indifferent mountains, then down at his hand, still pressed against the hidden jade. The disc felt different now. Not just a talisman against harm, but a weight, a reminder of the fragility it couldn't truly shield. A symbol of a cosmic order that felt brutally absent in the face of sand, steel, and sudden death. Yet, its coolness was real. Its smoothness was absolute, a tiny point of permanence in the flowing, devouring dunes. He didn't seek reassurance from it anymore. He simply acknowledged its presence, a cold, hard fact in a world of burning oil and falling blades. As the sun climbed towards its zenith, turning the desert into a white furnace, Master Deng signaled a halt near a meager cluster of tamarisk trees offering scant shade. Guards dismounted stiffly, checking bindings on wounded comrades, watering horses and camels from precious skins. The smell of sweat, animal musk, and the lingering, acrid ghost of Dunhuang's gunpowder mixed with the dry, resinous scent of the tamarisks. Li Wei leaned against his pony's warm flank, the camel wool rough on his neck. He scanned the shimmering horizon, not with fear now, but with a wary, alert resignation. The jade pressed its cool circle against his skin. The road stretched ahead, long and pitiless, winding towards the distant, watchful mountains. Somewhere out there, the raiders had vanished, or waited. The desert gave no sign. Only the wind moved, whispering secrets in the sand, carrying the faint, metallic echo of violence and the ancient, silent chill of the jade held close to a guard's wary heart. The pony shifted its weight. The tamarisk branches rattled dryly. The wounded man on the nearby litter groaned softly. Lao Chen spat a stream of red betel juice onto the pale sand, watching it sink and vanish instantly. Only dust remembers. He muttered again, his good eye scanning the southern dunes where the raiders had disappeared. But their ghosts ride with us now. The desert wind rose, sighing through the sparse tamarisk branches, carrying fine skeins of sand that whispered against Luwei's camel wool blanket. The caravan lay still in its meager patch of shade, a weary island in the vast, sun-scorched sea. The wounded guard's soft groans had subsided into fitful sleep. Lao Chen sat propped against a saddle, his good eye closed, his breathing a low rumble, the swollen one a livid purple testament to the night's fury. The scent of gunpowder had finally faded, chased away by the dry, resinous breath of the desert scrub and the pervasive, ancient smell of dust. Luwei remained standing, leaning against his pony's warm, solid flank. His fingers found the jade-by disc beneath his tunic once more. He didn't draw it out into the harsh light. He simply held it through the layers of rough, spun cloth and lamellar armor, feeling its cool, unyielding circle against his skin. The frantic pounding of his heart during the assault on Dunhuang's walls had slowed, replaced by a deep, resonant ache in his bones and a hollow quiet within. He looked back towards the east. Dunhuang was lost behind the curvature of the earth and the shimmering heat haze. The memory of the execution posts, stark against the dawn, felt distant now, bleached by the relentless sun like the bones scattered along the road. The massacre site they'd passed, already swallowed by the shifting sands, was a ghost already fading. Lao Chen was right. The desert forgot. It devoured blood, bone, and battle cries with impartial hunger. The Silk Road was less a path than a current in a vast, consuming landscape, where empires, caravans, and lives were fleeting marks upon the sand. His gaze swept the horizon south, where the raiders had melted into the dunes. West, towards the looming, snow-crowned Pamirs, the Tian Shan watched impassive sentinels. The road itself was the only constant, a ribbon of dust and danger winding towards distant markets and unknown perils. The jade disk felt heavy, a tangible fragment of a different world, a world of stillness, cosmic order, his father's quiet wisdom. It hadn't stopped the arrow, shielded him from the screams, or preserved the lives ended brutally at the Jade Gate. Its power wasn't defiance, he realized with a sudden, wary clarity. It was endurance. It was the unyielding mountain within the shifting dune. The cold, deep spring beneath the sun-baked plain. The perfect, silent circle of heaven held against the brutal, linear chaos of the earth. Hold the sky. Remember the center. The center wasn't safety, it was the quiet point within the storm. The place you returned to when the sand settled, even if it settled over graves. Master Deng stirred, signaling the end of the halt. Guards roused themselves, stiffly mounting. The wounded were lifted gently onto litters, their faces tight with pain. Camels groaned as they were urged back to their knees, then heaved upwards, swaying under their burdens of silk, pepper, and wax-sealed dreams. The caravan began to move again, the rhythmic thud, plod reclaiming the silence. Li Wei swung into his saddle. The pony shifted beneath him, a familiar warmth. He pulled the coarse blanket tighter, its scratch a grounding discomfort. Ahead, the road stretched, pale and infinite, leading towards the high passes and the lands beyond. The scent of the tamarisk faded, replaced once more by the ancient, mineral smell of dust. The jade disc lay cool and heavy against his chest, a silent companion on the long journey west. The desert wind whispered secrets, lost to time. The distant mountains held their glacial peace. The caravan guard's gaze remained fixed on the shimmering horizon, carrying the quiet center within him, a small, enduring circle of jade against the devouring sands. The camel wool scratched his neck. The dust coated his lips. The memory of steel and fire lingered like a phantom taste. The jade bee disc grows heavy. Li Wei's world softens at the edges. Carry this peace, woven of endurance and the endless sky. Sleep well, time weaver.